Good news can often get overlooked or buried by the negative in our everyday lives. So let's change that. I'm Adrianna.
And I'm Wyatt.
We're just two ordinary people without any special qualifications or anything, trying to navigate life. We invite you to join us as we share wholesome stories, news articles of hope, and ideas about how we can all make the world just a little bit brighter. We are uplifting positive stories. Welcome back to another episode of Uplifting Positive Stories. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Hopefully everybody's staying warm out there as it gets pretty cold here in the upper Midwest.
Yeah, it's definitely getting really, really cold. That's for sure. But we have some really good stories for today, so I'm
Help us
excited
feel
about
warm
that.
and fuzzy inside.
Yes, exactly.
As our exterior is freezing to death.
Exactly. And you know, this is going to be cheesy as heck, but
Do it. I don't know what it is, but do it.
today's episode is about deepening our understanding of others, and sometimes people have a cold exterior.
Oh, mic drop.
But maybe they're warm on the inside and they just don't know how to show it. So
A real
that's
Grinch theme here going.
Yeah, kind of, honestly. I didn't even think about that with the holidays. That's a good
That's
comparison.
next week's episode, the holiday episode.
Yeah, that's true. But today's stories kind of go into that theme of people and even animals seeming like they have a hard exterior or not seeming like they care about anybody or any of those things, and finding out that they really truly do. And maybe sometimes people have a different way of expressing it than we're used to. And so by trying to better understand people, we can feel a little bit better about them and not sometimes look at people with judgmental thoughts, thinking, oh, that person is so mean, they seem so mean, or they seem so harsh, or whatever it is those judgmental thoughts are. And instead, really trying to actually understand the person and why they are the way they are and why they do the things that they do, instead of instantly looking at it with anger and not even trying to give them a chance. So
Only because you mentioned animals as well. This is a tangent before going into the actual meat of the episode. But for some reason, it just made me think of when we first brought Legolas home, and Gimli hated that
we have
dog.
two dogs. For those that haven't listened to past episode, we have a small Shih Tzu named Gimli, and then a big Samoyed, which is very big size difference. The Samoyed's name is Legolas.
They're both sleeping just off camera there. Sometimes they walk over.
Our dogs, when Gimli first came home, Gimli was not happy that we had brought a puppy home because he was used to being an only child.
We thought we ruined that little dog's life.
We did.
He was so unhappy with this white, fluffy giant that we brought. Well, it wasn't actually that big at the time, but slightly bigger
compared
than him.
to him. And within a week, less than a week,
within a day, he started giving him some attention. But then he still acted like he hated him until one day we were working from home at the time during the pandemic. And I just happened to walk in the hallway, and there they are cuddling together. And Gimli looks up at me like, oh crap, I've been caught.
I've been found.
It's like, you love him. I knew it. You love him.
So yes.
He was cold to that white dog for a bit of time.
Exactly.
At least to our perspective, he seemed like you didn't like him for a while there.
Sometimes people can surprise us. Dogs can surprise us. Cats can surprise us. So we have some interesting stories.
That's my lighthearted tangent as we're just getting started.
Exactly. So this story comes from the subreddit Ask Reddit, from someone's question, what is the most wholesome story you've ever heard? And this story says, my dad decided he was going to grow watermelons when he was about 5. He was the baby at the time, so they all found it very amusing. My grandma cut up some watermelon and told him to keep the seeds, so he did. They went and planted them together. The next morning, my grandma told him to go check on his seeds. There, he found a watermelon, but my grandmother forgot the sticker on it with the price. Another story was when it was time for him to go to kindergarten. My grandma would walk him to school. About an hour or so later, he would appear. This was the early 60s in a small town. She asked him why he came home, and he said for oatmeal cookies. Every day, she brought him to school, and every day he snuck home. Finally, she decided to put him in another school further away. Except, she made sure he had oatmeal cookies for a snack every day. He stayed put.
That's called bribery.
I find these stories really special and endearing because my grandma was not the most affectionate person. I know she loved her family, she just wasn't sure how to show it.
Cookies was the answer.
Cookies.
Oatmeal cookies specifically.
And that's such a great example of, I think, the love languages. And some people say that they're a myth, but I think that there is
they're real.
Some real actual stuff to it, because some people just have certain ways of showing affection that are completely foreign to somebody else. And clearly for hers, giving gifts must have been one of them. And maybe words of affirmation was not. And so to other people that words are really meaningful, they might think she doesn't care about people.
Could be acts of service as well.
Could be acts of service. It could be, and that's a thing too.
I feel like giving gifts is probably the one that makes people think it's a myth, because he was going to be like, I like getting stuff. That's my love language, you know.
Right, but it's the
like,
thought behind it.
The thought behind it. And it's a real love language. It's just gotta, you don't want to abuse the phrase.
Right, yeah. But I mean, with acts of service too, I think that's one that often gets overlooked because it's not a very overt way of showing affection necessarily. But for people that go out of their way to maybe, I don't know, make a meal for somebody, or go out of their way to clean up something for the other person, it's things that you might just kind of go, oh, thanks, that was really helpful, and not really realize that was actually like an act of affection from the person. And so sometimes we can think people are uncaring or are stoic, but they're just showing it in a way that is natural to them, that is very unnatural to us. And so kind of looking below the surface and trying to actually take a beat and go, what are some times that this person did something, and maybe that was their way of showing that they cared, that I just didn't really notice because it's not a way I would have showed that I cared.
Right.
You know?
It's sort of a segue a little bit.
Yeah.
I've been seeing a couple reels lately talking about how in Beauty and the Beast, how the Beast's gift to Belle is like it's the worst gift ever, because it gives her a library that he already had.
Library that he already owned.
But the thing is, yes, if you're looking from that perspective, yes, that is a terrible gift. He put no effort into the actual gift itself. He already had the library.
Yes.
He already had the books. But he listened and learned enough about her to put the thought that she would like the books and she'd want to be able to read those, and that she would benefit from them in a way that he has not. So in that way, he is showing
that
love in that kind of a way.
Right.
Yes, it is a bad gift in that traditional sense. But
Yes.
I think that the act of... Anyway, that's my rant tangent about that. Like, on the thread of sometimes love being shown in different ways.
Yeah, because it could be ways that are not
animated
overt.
Disney movie.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, just showing that you listened. Yeah. Even just like bringing up stuff that you told them years ago that you liked, and being like, oh, do you still watch this thing, or do you still enjoy this thing? That is a form of love in its own way, showing that I listened to you. And even though we might just go, oh, that's just a polite thing that they're, trying to connect with me on, that can be a sign of love as well that we might just overlook. And so, yeah, just looking a little deeper when someone seems like they don't care or things like that, and look below the surface and see if there is something that maybe you just haven't picked up on, because everyone is so different. All right, here's another one. This story comes from Ask Reddit, and the title or the question on Ask Reddit that elicited this response is, those who have weird neighbors, what does your neighbor do that is weird or creepy?
Oh, I want to have responses to that, but that's not necessarily nice. Not they're bad. It's just privacy. I don't know if that would be okay with them.
Yeah.
Or not.
But this story
Debatable.
says,
Funny stories at least.
This story says, so I had a neighbor, 80-year-old or more, widowed guy. Every time I get the newspaper delivered to my mailbox, when I open it, I find that the crosswords are done. I don't do them or give a darn. One day, I decided to try to catch who's been doing my crosswords. Day 1, 8 a.m., they were already done. Day 2, 7:30 a.m., already done. Day 3, 7 a.m., I decided to give up. One day...
What time does it arrive?
One day at 4 a.m., I was getting back home from a night out. While I was passing by the mailbox, nothing yet delivered. So I placed my GoPro inside and I went sleeping. The next day, I finally got it. It was my neighbor. He has done the crosswords right up on my mailbox for like 10 minutes. I will try to find the video, but it was absolutely cute, staring at my door time to time and scratching his head. Next day, I took him a 1,000 crosswords book, dropped it right by his door, rang the doorbell, and stayed in my car discreetly. He took some time to open the door and then found it. I swear it was the happiest person, like a kid that got a puppy. He stayed in his porch and passed like 2 hours doing crosswords, then fell asleep, lol. The next day, I was getting back home from work, and he came to apologize, like a kid that had to confess to something, and brought some cookies. We stayed talking about his World War II service and how the world had changed. I frequently brought him crossword books until he passed away a year ago. May he rest in peace. I thought this was a great example of not looking at something and snapping to anger when something is weird or frustrating, because when someone does something strange that is kind of inconvenient to you. I don't think it was super inconvenient in this situation, but in general, or just something that you're like, that's not a social norm. Like, you don't steal someone's newspaper and do the crossword and put it back in their mailbox. That's just not a norm. You don't do that. And instead,
maybe ask. Maybe
ask before doing something like that. But instead of snapping to anger, they gave them the opportunity to come forward themselves, and they were like, this guy must just really like doing crosswords.
Well, they didn't just leave him to come forward himself. They encouraged it by giving him a
book of crosswords.
Didn't encourage the act itself, but encouraged their passion and enjoyment of doing crosswords by giving them a gift, which is a love language.
Yes, but think about if they had gone the other route and like been like, hey, stop doing my crosswords. Like, that's, you can't just take someone's mail, and gotten really upset about it and told them off. Which they could have done. They could have been like,
legal
hey,
right, you know?
Hey, don't do that. But by doing that opposite approach and giving them a chance to, you know, build that relationship if they wanted to, it became a good neighborly experience. They obviously kind of made a friend with their neighbor in that situation. The neighbor then confessed and apologized, brought them cookies, and they got to talking and stuff. So I think not quickly jumping to frustration or anger when someone is doing something very odd or strange that you deem as rude or impolite and not like a norm. Maybe take a breath and think about it for a minute and be like, okay, is this really actually hurting me in some way, or is it just odd? You know, because some people do some weird things, and sometimes we might think it's rude, but maybe they just don't know better, or maybe they're just like, oh, they probably don't care. You know, just give it a moment. Don't jump to conclusions that they're out to do something rude on purpose, or that they're knowingly hurting you or inconveniencing you in some way. Give it a moment and give it some consideration.
I have to imagine this isn't in Minnesota, because I'm trying to imagine, like, can you imagine that here where it's so cold outside and they're outside at 4 a.m.? That's just death hour in Minnesota winter. Doing the crossword puzzle, like, it's shaky,
That's
you know?
so funny. Just that image is so funny. But how sweet, though. I love that imagery of the video of him, like, taking it for 2 hours doing the crossword super excitedly in that book. That's so sweet. Okay, another one comes from Ask Reddit, and this one is from a thread that says, what is the most wholesome thing you've seen? This one says, definitely my 5th grade teacher, Miss Penland. I remember hearing all the Matilda-esque horror stories from other students about mean old Miss Penland. One time, she supposedly threw a clock at a student. Another time, she tossed a student out of a window, etc.
Wait, what?
You know how myths get passed down with kids.
A myth. Okay.
I mean, who knows if they actually were or not, but that's the thing she had heard about mean old Miss Penland, right?
Gotcha. That was an important detail I missed.
I mean, I don't know that for sure, but you know how kids pass that down.
That's gotta be a myth. I'm pretty sure they would have been fired or jailed.
And then I'll go back to the story. Like, I remember there was a detention person, this lady that was in charge of detention at our elementary school, and there was a lot of stories like that. Like, oh, if you get sent to the detention center, that lady, she will hit you with a ruler, and like all these things. And I was terrified. And one time I had to go there to pick up a student from her room to bring him back to the class, and I was terrified. And I went in there, and they were all just like, she was helping them with their homework, and she was like, oh, hi, did you want a sucker before you leave? And I was like, what?
Aren't you the devil?
Yeah, I thought you were super mean. So yeah, you know, myths get passed between kids, especially in elementary school. People like drama in elementary school. So anyways, back to the story. I was expecting the worst when I got her as my teacher. She was tough and strict, to be sure, but obviously an extremely dedicated woman. We would have snack time every afternoon where students could mingle for 10 minutes and eat whatever snacks they brought from home. I could not afford anything like that. One day, I came into class and I noticed a brown paper bag in my chair filled with Oreos, crackers, and sometimes Lunchables. Every day, all year, there was always a bag in my chair at the start of class each day, even on days when we had substitutes. I was a very skinny kid who always dressed dirty, but she never made a big deal out of it. Christmas that year, she actually came to my house with a big bag of presents for me and my younger brother. I remember being in total disbelief that this evil woman was so kind to me. Looking back on it, I'm filled with humility and love for the best teacher I ever had. If anyone knows Miss Penland from Merrill Road Elementary School, Jacks, Florida, please thank her for me. She was the very best. Yeah. Super
Defying
cool.
expectations.
Yeah, well, and I think it also comes down to understanding people with, especially with like teachers and stuff. Kids will kind of make decisions really early about, oh, that teacher seems mean. Because sometimes teachers are a little more strict and they won't put up with the funny business. You know, if kids are being a little more rowdy and stuff, maybe they don't allow that in their classroom and they shut it down really fast. Everyone handles things differently. And so sometimes, especially when maybe it was like she had one bad day in a classroom and all the kids in that class are like, oh, that teacher's so mean. And then that passes on to the next class coming into her class of, oh, she's a mean teacher, watch out. And then that preconception comes in. And so they're like, oh, this teacher's mean. And then they treat her with the expectation of that. And so she can sense that these kids don't like me. You know what I mean? That can sometimes cause problems too. Sometimes kids do pick sometimes teachers do pick favorites and treat other students poorly. There are always exceptions to what I'm saying, of course.
There's also the reverse of that.
There is the reverse. And so I actually remember too, there was a couple times when I was in middle school and high school where there was a teacher that everyone viewed as super, super mean or not friendly or whatever. And sometimes by understanding them a little bit better, sometimes that you can break that outer shell and they're actually super, super nice. Like I remember I had a teacher in middle school and I remember everyone said she was just super mean because she canceled one of the units that everyone was looking forward to because kids were throwing supplies, and she got really frustrated. She's like, we're not doing this unit. And the kids were like, what? But every year the 8th graders get to do this thing and it's super fun. And she's like, well, I'm not doing it because you're not respecting the supplies. And so everyone's like, she's super, super mean. And so she made us do art history instead for that unit, which unfortunately for 8th graders was very boring. And so a lot of teachers... Art history
is a little rough when you're younger.
It is rough. And it was all like PowerPoint slides with just text on it that we had to like write down and copy and then test. So that's what we had to do instead of the fun unit. It was a bummer. But I remember that there was a extra credit opportunity to go to this first after school art club thing that she was running. And because it was extra credit to go to the first one, it was a packed room. It was like literally like 50 kids showed up to this thing. And I was one of them. And I was like, wow, this is a huge turnout. I wasn't expecting this. Next art club thing that happened the next day was not extra credit opportunity. No one came except me. I was the only one in the room, which was quite awkward when you're the only one that shows up for a club. But through that, I ended up sticking around and I showed up for this art club every week. So it was just me and her. So I basically got like one-on-one art teaching for, I think it was like 5 months. Anyways, through that experience, she started kind of lamenting about how it really bothered her because she actually had to pay for a lot of the supplies for the art class from her own pocket to get the stuff that she wanted to be able to teach. And kids were just destroying them. Like, repeatedly, and she didn't have a lot of money to be replacing them. And so that was something she had told me, and throughout the months I kind of got a better understanding of her, of like, she's not mean, she's just feeling disrespected by these kids because they're just ruining her supplies without batting an eyelash. And then when she calls them on it, they're like, so, and they were just super disrespectful about it. And so she wasn't actually mean, she was really, really nice. She was just really sad and frustrated, which I get. And so that was something that once I actually understood it, like I was like, no, she's great. People just need to be more respectful. And she probably would be a lot more friendly in class, you know? So sometimes it's something that you're not aware of that they're dealing with that can be showing that hard exterior. And that might be the case with this Miss Penland in the story. We don't know. But sometimes they're actually the nicest people. You just have to better understand them. Another couple stories here. This comes from the subreddit, Ask Reddit. Same thread, what is the most wholesome thing you have seen? And it says, the most wholesome thing that comes to mind is once my family and I were driving with my grandma, who is 93, and rather stern, stubborn, and unwilling, but not mean. But when we were driving, she spotted a cat and she exclaimed in the happiest I've ever seen her in a while, "Oh, kitty!" And it is by far the most adorable thing I've ever seen. And I think my family can agree that it was really out of character for her, but adorable nonetheless. So again, sometimes people might have a hard exterior and be mushy-gushy on the inside. We just don't know. We don't know what brings that out of people. But we can see it in this story. So this is a good example of what brings it out of people sometimes. But in the case of animals in this story. So this story also comes from that same exact thread, and it says, "So a friend of mine has this very bitter and very mean old dog. Like, wouldn't let anyone but said friend touch her, or really get anywhere near her. The old timer even nipped me one good time in the ankle for getting too close to her territory. And about roughly a year or two ago, this little kitten came up on their property, being about as sweet as can be. And my friend's husband, being the cat person that he is, decides to bring him in. Safe to say, we're all worried about this poor kitten. We're worried he's about to get thrashed by this mean dog, so we get them separated as best we can by one of those cheap little dog gates. Cut to about an hour later, we went outside for a smoke, and I sat out there for about maybe 45 minutes just hanging out. And once we get back inside, we see that the dog had managed to make a small opening in the gate to get through. And what we saw was probably the most shocking thing for all of us. This mean old dog was on the couch with that little kitten curled up right next to her, sound asleep. And ever since then, they have been the best of pals, and the old dog had just changed around completely. Turns out, all she needed was that just one special friend."
Animals can be great.
Yeah, right?
Sometimes they can be mean to each other, though.
But I think that's a good example for people, too, is sometimes people are lonely. And when people are lonely, sometimes that can create that hard exterior that people kind of start thinking, oh, they're mean. No, they might just be sad and lonely. And
or
they
maybe
might
that
just
dog
need...
maybe it was a foster dog that had gone through at one point of its life, and it had a bad experience with people and stuff. So it's a very small level of trust then with the owner and stuff. You don't know what their background is. Clearly, cat's cool.
Right, exactly.
At least that cat's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe sometimes too, just reaching out and to people that maybe seem like they have a hard exterior can sometimes give us a better understanding of them and maybe help change that. You never know. So better understanding people, better understanding how they show affection, better understanding maybe what's going on in their life that we don't know about. And yeah, just trying to relate to them and make them not feel alone in whatever that may look like. Maybe it's showing that love language back to them. That whatever that they realize that they do a lot, Maybe they don't feel like they get shown affection because their love language is not the one that you express, So sometimes it can be just understanding that can lead to better interactions. So, all right. And then we're going to end off our podcast today with a interesting news article that I found from Reuters.com. It is titled, "The Morphing Wheel from South Korea That May Transform Lives and Robots." So researchers at the Korea Institute of Machinery and Materials created a type of wheel that can go up curbs, humps, and even staircases. It basically is an outer hoop of a chain and a series of spoke wires that run through the hub. And then the stiffness of the spokes, and hence the wheel, is automatically regulated by a sensor as it reacts to the terrain. They said it was inspired by the surface tension of water droplets, so it can go from solid to fluid when it encounters impediments in the terrain.
Okay.
Yeah, so with this, they're hoping it could be a good thing for wheelchairs, for robots that are used for delivering things, because some people obviously have steps going up to their doorsteps and stuff like that. So it could go up doorsteps. So it could, in theory, could deliver food and groceries to people. It can roll over obstacles up to 1.3 times the height of its radius of the wheel. So you could do different wheel sizes to be able to go up different types of stairs or whatever. They demonstrated it using a wheelchair with those wheels, and it climbed up stairs with 18-centimeter steps with a life-size dummy sitting in it successfully. So, yeah, that could be huge, especially for people that have wheelchairs, because unfortunately, a lot of places are not always great at accommodating wheelchairs, and they don't always have ramps. And
sometimes the environment doesn't cooperate with wheelchairs.
Exactly. So imagine if all wheelchairs ended up being built with this type of morphing wheel where it could just, even if there are steps, just go up it with no problem. That'd be incredible. That'd be huge for people. I know even people maybe weren't expecting to have an injury where they suddenly are stuck in a wheelchair. and they have stairs in their house and all the bedrooms are upstairs.
Right.
That could be huge for that, not having to reconfigure your whole house or even have to get a new house just to accommodate that. You could then just use your wheelchair up the steps, things like that would just be crazy if this becomes mainstream. But yeah, pretty cool. I thought that was really exciting. And that was this story was written on November 14th. So this is pretty recent. So yeah, pretty exciting scientific advancements are happening. Kind of cool. Every once in a while, it's kind of fun to throw some of those in there because I would not have heard about it unless I actively sought for it. So yeah, pretty cool.
I like it for the wheelchairs. I don't know if I love it for the robots. Do we need to give them an easier time to replace us?
I mean, that's fair. But
Will
still,
this future episode
I'm sure it could be used for other things too, though. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
think about, I don't know, certain vehicles that people ride and stuff like that, having that kind of a wheel to be able to help with when there's rough terrain and stuff like that. That could be really cool too. Like motorcycles and stuff like that. Who knows? The applications I'm sure are kind of endless with it.
Yeah, well, it's a starting point. I imagine it can't probably withstand like high speeds or like high weight load at this point.
It can go up to speeds of up to 30 kph. I'm not sure what that is.
It's kilometers per hour.
Yeah,
I think that'd be less miles per hour.
Yeah.
So I don't think it could do like highway speeds.
No, I don't think it can get to that point, but that's still pretty crazy. So yeah, pretty cool. With that, we will end today's episode. We're excited for next week's episode on Wednesday. It is all going to be all about happiness during the holidays. So that'll be a really fun episode. Lots of sweet moments in those stories I'm excited to share. And yeah, if you have a positive story that you'd like to share with us, please send it to us at upliftingpositivestories@gmail.com, or you can post it on our subreddit at Uplift Positive Stories. Even if it's a short little story, we just love hearing from all of you. It's so cool to hear your own personal positive stories you've either experienced yourself or seen someone experience. It's very uplifting for us to read them. And yeah, if you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We always appreciate all the support. And yeah, have a great rest of your week, everybody.
And stay positive.